So yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's actually evening for us here, but it doesn't stop us from having a coffee.
And it's great to have you guys around. Today we're going to cover our general opinions on the current situation of the ecosystem, the most recent incidents. We're going to talk about where we are at Cartesi, the rollup-centric approach of Ethereum, and we can have a more free conversation, address some questions.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll get started right away. And I think it's just important to note for the legal side, I mean, anything we say here is not financial advice. It's our opinion and the work we're doing, so just in case.
Yeah, exactly. Please don't take anything we say here as any recommendation, however. So our main purpose with Cartesi is to build something that's going to be very important for the developers of Web3 in the future. We understand that the current state of affairs, there is a high emphasis in solving the scalability issues of the blockchain, but you guys must know that we come from a position that we think that's not enough. More needs to be done for us to make Web3 really adoptable.
Yeah, we need to start seeing dApps that are created outside of the simple DeFi platforms we see, really out of the box and closer to what we see in the centralized world.
Yeah.
So we want to make that a reality.
Yeah, and I think it's good to start. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, very briefly about our history, right? Because
Sure.
people may not know, we were born in the bear market.
Exactly. The worst bear market there was, the crypto winter.
2018 was the year when we incorporated. We started having the earliest conversations about Cartesi at the end of 2017.
Yeah.
2018, we decided together to incorporate, create the entities, and start our formal operations. And you may imagine, 2018, there was a huge crash, not very different from what we're experiencing today. And it was not easy at all for us as a founders in the crypto space, blockchain space, to fundraise, get attention from investors, and get enough fuel to go on with our vision.
In fact, it was very difficult. So when we first started the project, the market was not quite crashing just yet, and we were very optimistic. We talked to hundreds of investors, but unfortunately, short after, the big crypto winter came, the crash happened, and we were a little bit stuck. So but we pushed on, we survived, eventually found those who believed in what we were building, and here we are today. We made it through an entire crypto winter.
And in a sense, it's not so bad. That's sometimes entrepreneurs, they go through some periods of not so much abundance, that they have to really strive to get their funds and remain on track with their vision. I think that creates some strength for people to move forward. We saw lots of projects that got a lot of money early in 2017.
Absolutely.
And probably most of them, we barely hear of them nowadays. They just made insane amounts of money. And where are the results?
It was a bit of a curse. I mean, in startups, one of the golden rules is you do things that don't scale. So growing the team extremely fast, like hiring hundreds of people, is actually a curse because it will be so messy, the vision won't be fulfilled, and things will just be too complicated.
And I think that's a good hook for the first topic that we want to talk about today. That it baffles me how great institutions, like big institutions, big names, sometimes they fall prey to this kind of poor strategies, right? So we see this happening to some extent to Coinbase, that they had to lay off so many people.
Exactly.
Right.
And we see this, so in this current state of the market, a lot of this crash was fueled. Of course, we covered the situation with UST and Terra last time. And most recently, we've seen a couple of other firms in a bad situation as well. So there was Celsius.
And last time whoever was here with us in the last Coffee with Cartesi, we were breaking down the problem of Luna, how that catastrophe happens. And actually that was the beginning of the fall of something like a house of cards, right? So
exactly,
the episode of Luna and Terra pulled a card in the middle of the castle, and lots of things start to ruin after that.
I think this is what created the snowball effect. So the snowball started rolling, and the next to be hit was Celsius.
Exactly, and that's where I feel a little bit brokenhearted sometimes.
For sure.
I believe that Celsius never acted out of bad faith. I think the guys were trying to do something serious, and I was really hopeful that Celsius would provide some interesting alternative to traditional finance, right? And that was their goal.
That was their vision. I mean, to unbank yourself.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this went a little bit wrong for them.
And sometimes we believe, because these are reputable institutions, they grow very fast, they seem to have a reliable team, and then we tend to believe that that means that they're managing well their assets and people's assets. But what we're learning in this cycle, that's not true at all. And then we have here several examples about this, and that's a very interesting learning opportunity for everyone in this space, the people who are building, the founders, the investors, the developers, everyone. And I think we have to grow out of this situation, to really understand and learn this lesson.
Yeah, it actually shows how important transparency is, and seeing how you manage security and the safety of the treasury for the project's future potential.
Exactly. And I think we could maybe talk a little bit about Celsius, what we see about Celsius, right? So
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in the current state, the news is that Celsius has frozen all of the withdrawals. So users that had funds deposited there cannot get them out at the moment, and they're not sure what's going to happen. So basically, Celsius is now taking time to try and become liquid with all of their assets, with their treasury, or raising funds before they can restart withdrawals. And maybe we can go over a little bit to why that happened.
Yeah, and as we said before, the people who are putting their money under the custody of platforms like Celsius, sometimes they don't know, or there is no transparency about how they are managing these funds, right? And
exactly.
Just to give an example, we found recently that Celsius had something like 30,000 Ether on Stakehound, and an episode that apparently Stakehound lost the private keys and they cannot retrieve these funds from Celsius.
Yeah, so essentially they lost, I think it was 38,000 ETH, which is an insane amount of money, especially when the market was in a bull market. So this is nuts, and it's a huge blow to their users' funds and treasury and stability overall. And this was not the only incident that happened. So there was also the Badger DAO hack, where they lost another big portion of funds. And because of this snowball effect, when the market was going down, we had also the staked ETH depeg. And this actually forced Celsius to liquidate a lot of their staked ETH holdings to make sure that they have funds to cover withdrawals. And of course, this all led to more panic.
Yeah, and of course, Lido seems to be a very stable and reliable platform. You can stake your Ether in exchange for STETH that gives you liquidity, with the promise that with your STETH you can reclaim your original ETH after the merge of Ethereum. Of course, you cannot retrieve your ETH until then, but you have the interest gains throughout this period. So one might expect that STETH would be more or less naturally pegged around ETH, but due to the crisis in the markets, there was a reasonable depegging between STETH and ETH.
Yeah, Lido is actually very trustworthy, very nice product. However, this is the price of liquidity. So if a lot of big players need to get out of staked ETH fast, of course the price will go down.
Yeah.
It actually presents a good opportunity.
And then all this situation, people start to panic. There were rumors on Twitter that Celsius might be in trouble, and shortly thereafter that actually happened. People started to bank run on Celsius, and they very fast entered a liquidity crisis. They had no money to give to people when they were trying to withdraw their assets.
Yeah, and so here we are. And that kind of led to the next big crisis in the crypto market.
3AC.
3AC. Three Arrows Capital, for those of you who know them. So they were also another big kind of fund manager, big hedge fund that's playing in the crypto space. And to keep a long story short, they're managing funds of various crypto projects all over via loans. So they take your money and try to make more money with it in various DeFi protocols, various CeFi protocols, wherever they can try to get the highest yields.
And then again, you would expect, or project founders who lend their money to AC would expect that they are being very responsible and reasonably conservative in investing these funds. But no, they were actually being very radical and risking a lot with the assets of everyone.
Unfortunately, yeah, they were playing kind of the degen role.
Exactly.
Trying to get the highest yields without thinking too much.
And then these things only happen when it's already bad enough, right? Because until then, you don't know exactly, because of the lack of transparency, you don't know exactly what kind of tricks they are actually up to.
Yeah. I mean, this really shows the importance of security and transparency and how projects need to be careful with their funds and how they manage.
And 3AC, by the way, when UST crashed, they had around more than 600 million US dollars in UST, and it became basically dust. Right now, those $600 million became something like $700. Like they lost 1 million X.
There's like 9 figures to 3 figures.
So I mean, it feels like we're kind of beating that horse here. But I mean, I think we don't want to go so dark here in this analysis. But I think it's important for us to see a underlying pattern here that I think it's very healthy for us in the industry to learn, right? That you have to be careful when you lend your money to custodians and VCs, and you never know what kind of things they are doing. And these projects, they seem to be intertwined much more than we could imagine, right? So apparently the crash of one thing brings down the crash of the other thing. It's a kind of house of cards.
Absolutely. And what I think is most important to note is how truly real decentralized finance is still working quite good. Although CeFi has had a bit of an implosion, even following traditional laws like KYC, consumer protection, the well-designed protocols like Aave or Compound are still fully functioning, showing the true use case of decentralized finance when done properly and safely.
Yeah. I think that's a light in the middle of this darkness, let's say, because there is a real and sound, solid DeFi that is proving to stand their ground. Now, aside from this, also recently we had the Harmony Bridge hack. Needless to say, another situation of irresponsibility here, because apparently the hacker got a hold of 2 of the private keys of a multi-sig that 2 out of 5 people needed to sign to be able to transfer funds.
That's one flaw there. You should at least have 3 out of 5, the majority, right? So.
Managing so much money, 2 out of 5 is crazy. You should have at least 3 out of 5. And apparently they were not using hardware wallets, right? Because
very surprising to me.
Because the hackers got to the private key itself. So if they were using a ledger or treasure, something like this, they wouldn't be able to steal the private key.
It would be infinitely harder.
Yeah.
And I think this is like a really good example of how important it is to be careful with the treasury and the management of the funds and security. And that kind of brings us to Cartesi.
Yeah. I think it's important to then you might be asking yourselves, right? So how Cartesi is managing funds, how you guys deal with your assets. We are very conservative, in fact, right? We don't try to make crazy investments and leverage or any crazy thing like this. We managed to safeguard enough capital for many years to come to keep developing and roll out our vision.
Yeah, so we wanted to reiterate that there's absolutely no worry of Cartesi not having enough funds. We have many years of runway. During the bull market, we were extremely conservative. We were really careful with how we manage the treasury, especially in regards to security.
Yeah.
So
so we are still hiring, by the way. Of course, probably not going to expand so fast as we would if we were in the bull market, but we are still hiring. We're not laying off. So it's we are stable.
Exactly. So we're glad to keep building. We're working as hard as ever right now. So we just had our most recent release, which is a big step towards our testnet. Getting really excited about that upcoming milestone.
Definitely. And it's important to let people know that yes, any developer can come now and start to develop with Cartesi Rollups Alpha. They can have everything they need to develop. And we are moving very fast toward testnet. Whoever is following our monthly reports can see continuous gradual progress in that direction.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I mean, we have a lot of transparency for those who aren't familiar on our Medium. So we have our regular transparency reports around our treasury and management of CTSI. And we also have our development recaps, which outlines every single milestone, what we did over the last month, and what has been achieved. So anyone can see what we're up to, how we're progressing with development, and what's being released.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, we have all these companies, startups, integrators who are prototyping, developing some interesting examples on Cartesi. Right. So there are prototypes of DeFi, prototypes of games, even prototypes of computer vision,
Yeah.
which would be, it's something quite interesting because how could you ever imagine running AI in a decentralized fashion? So
fully decentralized
Yeah.
fashion. It's going to be quite a show. We're looking really forward to showcasing the integrators' work in an upcoming campaign soon.
How about we talk a little bit about the merge, if
Sure.
2.0?
Yeah, I
Right,
think
because
that's a
one
good
thing,
topic.
yeah, one thing that I see very often people asking on Telegram, on Twitter is Cartesi going to be relevant after Ethereum upgrades? Because Ethereum is going to be more scalable, so why do you need to at all, right? And in fact, it's quite the contrary. Actually, not only Cartesi, but every single rollup solution like Arbitrum, Optimism, any ZK rollups, they are all going to perform much better as Ethereum rolls out their next milestones. And whoever follows Vitalik's posts and articles, in 2000, end of 2020, he released a piece.
The rollup-centric road.
Yeah, it was a vision about rollup-centric roadmap for Ethereum, where basically he was realizing that Ethereum previously had a plan to become scalable for the execution of smart contracts on layer one. However, with the progress of Plasma and more importantly of Rollups technology, it was becoming clear that it was much more efficient to move all execution off chain to layer two. And with Rollups, you can actually give the same security guarantees or very, very good security guarantees close to layer one guarantees. And so there was a shift in the direction of Ethereum in end of 2020 that they said, okay, maybe it's not good for us to try to make Ethereum scalable enough as an execution layer. Instead, we should give support, all the support we can to make these rollups perform as well as they can, right? And that makes a lot of sense. And so the idea of having different shards, having execution is a very convoluted project.
Very complex.
Ethereum had that on their roadmap, and they kind of understood that, first of all, that would take years to come because it's very complex to maintain consistency of execution across rollups.
And one thing just quickly on that note is that it's important to note when the merge actually happens. I believe there is a date in August now, actually, but sharding is not implemented at that date. So this merge is simply merging what they call the beacon chain, where ETH is being staked, moving the proof of work chain into proof of stake.
Yes.
So we don't actually get a lot of scalability changes from this.
Yes. So just to cut short and summarize the idea for the rollup-centric roadmap for Ethereum is that instead of having Ethereum being a monolithic blockchain solves all and everyone runs everything on that vision is just outdated, right? Yeah. We are not going to get there. So instead, Ethereum now is going to prioritize data availability, allowing data to be stored very cheaply, because by doing that and having the execution move to rollups, then you have the optimal system or conjunction of systems for this rollup-centric roadmap.
Exactly. And then I think we can go a little bit into the future of this vision, where we might start to see layer 3.
Exactly. So recently we have been hearing about the modularity of blockchains.
Yes. Yeah.
So Ethereum, the rollup-centric vision is already a modular approach to blockchain design. Namely, we are already separating the execution layer from the settlement layer and data availability, right? And we're starting to see the emergence of these application-specific rollups. And this is important to explain because if you have a rollups chain, and you let everyone deploy their applications and all users join the same rollups chain, eventually you're going to have the same scalability limitation that you had in layer 1. It doesn't really scale too much in the future, right? You're gonna reach some limit at some point.
In a technical sense, you can think of many dApps, for example, on other layer 2s like Arbitrum or Optimism. All of the Uniswap, Curve, Aave, you name it. They're kind of all running on one virtual machine.
Yeah, exactly. So there is like, you have all these applications competing for processor
Space.
time and space and resources in the same validators. So of course it doesn't scale, right? So
And this is kind of what we call content
yeah,
scalability.
we're
in a
gonna get
sense.
there about in a minute. We're gonna get there in a minute. But basically, if you have a single rollups, you have the same problem of scalability that you had only one alone.
Yeah.
It's something like, for whoever doesn't understand this technically very well, it's just like you go to a bank to do a transaction. You just enter the queue. Let's say you have 20 people serving in their cashiers behind the counter, and then when you finally get to your turn, then you have, instead of one person serving you, have the 20 people that were there, the 20 employees doing your single work. Then the next person in the line, you're going to have the 20 employees again doing your work. So of course it doesn't scale. And the same problem
That's
happens.
a good example. Yeah.
Same happens with rollups as a single chain. So it's clear that you're going to have a future that you're going to have one rollups per application, and that's going to be super scalable.
So maybe we can go over about how this works in practice. Maybe it's hard to imagine how application-specific rollups will work in tangent with something users are familiar with, like Arbitrum or Optimism, where they have this composable layer.
Yeah, actually, this you're going to have to enter with your assets on the application and exit from the application. So the application has its own rollups. And the application has its own set of validators, right? So each application can, by the way, decide on the security guarantees and level of centralization that they need, and tune these things accordingly to the needs of the application. So that's very convenient. That creates a burden in composability and in moving funds around from layer 3 to layer 2 or from one application to the other. And there's a lot of research being done around this. There are several projects developing bridges, basically of liquidity providers. So there is good development happening around this idea. And this seems to be it's interesting to notice, if you guys go through Cartesi's white paper in 2018, that's actually our vision from scratch, that we intended to have what we call local consensus. What we called local consensus back then is exactly each application has its own set of validators.
Exactly. And that's what we're aiming at here. And we're confident we're going to find solutions to these composable layer problems, which we're already doing heavy research on.
Yeah.
Do you want to, maybe it's time to elaborate a little bit more on that content scalability?
Sure.
What we're meaning there?
Yeah, so at Cartesi we have been talking a lot about the concept of content scalability, right? When you talk about the scalability of blockchains, we normally think about scaling computation, scaling I/O, scaling data. But in Cartesi, we believe that these things are totally fundamental, but they are not enough, right? The EVM and Solidity are not enough for the future of Web3, for the future of rollups.
Exactly.
Essentially because there is a severance, there is a cut, there is a hard cut in the infrastructure that developers find on Web3, on rollups, or on layer 1, compared to all the rich infrastructure that developers have to build Web2 applications, to build desktop or mobile applications. And that's because all the developments of the web, Web2, mobile, desktop, happens on top of operating systems that have been around for decades, 40 years, 50 years, right?
And all of this software and content has been matured and developed over these 30, 40 years. So you can imagine the tools that are available compared to Solidity, for example.
That's right. And you see, our lives nowadays run on software, right? I think it was Andreessen Horowitz that said that software is eating the world, right? Yeah. I like this statement. Nice. It sounds a little bit creepy and cyberpunkish, but it's true, right? You just look at how many hours you spend per day checking our phone or talking to people or sending and receiving data.
We are kind of like cyborgs.
We are already
without
cyborgs,
the phones or nothing.
Right? So we are already living too much on the virtual space, and the reason why that happened was due to the fact that we enjoyed content scalability. That's the concept we want to explore here today. Yeah. That's all the software, the rich software that we use on Web2, let's say Twitter, Airbnb, Uber, everything that people use nowadays, they are not built in isolation. People are not building the software using Solidity, right? They're not building the software using assembly or writing a program from scratch in C. No, they are using tools, software stacks, components that people have been evolving and working on, like thousands of developers throughout decades. They have been developing components and software stacks that allow the Uber developers, the Airbnb developers to somehow quickly come with their products to market, because they are standing on the shoulder of giants. They're standing on software stacks and components that have matured throughout decades. Now, when you come to Web3, when you come to Solidity and the EVM, that's not there. There is no operating system. There are no software stacks. There are no components.
You pretty much have the power of a calculator.
Exactly, and then even to implement the most basic things, like to implement a logarithm function or
open a file.
Or open a file, to very basic things that you have in computer science, they're not available on the blockchain, on Web3 programming. And I understand that the most fundamental thing here to solve is scalability, because if you don't scale, you can't even think about running an OS. But once you solve the scalability issue, the next big thing to solve is the content scalability. What does it mean? Means that when I produce new content, when I produce new software, new application, instead of me having to reinvent the wheel of lots of things that were already invented in the past, I just reuse them. I just reuse a vast array of open source software that is readily available for decades, that I can use as a Lego to compose my software and deploy it.
This in itself, this open source network of software, is actually a scaling aspect in itself.
Yeah. So that's a very important concept here. Cartesi is not only about computation scalability, it's also about content scalability, because you bring an operating system, and with that, all the software stacks that are available on mainstream.
For sure. So I think that was a good overview. I mean, we've been rambling here for quite a while.
Yeah.
Maybe does anyone want to jump in and join the conversation here? Maybe ask a few questions. I know one has requested, so I'll just approve you now.
Oh, hello. Hypeman Apia. Background in M&A and private equity. Love the ethos, technical progress, and vision of Cartesi, and thank you for regularly engaging the community. My question is, what efforts are Cartesi taking as the blockchain OS to directly engage major traditional institutions, such as Microsoft or Apple or Bad Robot, to help drive the mass adoption narrative? I believe a collaboration between traditional and non-traditional enterprise helps everyone garner, respect, and embrace the benefits of blockchain industry vicariously through Cartesi.
Well, that's a good question. And I mean, this is important, but it's a little bit down the line, right? So the first thing we want to do is start with the first steps. First of all, we need to position ourselves as, these Rollups alternative on the Ethereum ecosystem. And we are looking at not only Web3 developers, existing Web3 developers, but also at mainstream developers, Web2 developers. So there is a lot of emphasis in working with educational contents, improving our developers' journey experience, and work with startups and work first with companies that are already convinced that they want to enter Web3, that they want to enter crypto, because those are the low-hanging fruits, right? So it's easier for Cartesi to start with the people who are already convinced that they want to build a blockchain, but they don't have the resources, or they have a lot of difficulty with the existing tools. So that's where we can help.
Yeah, I think it's important to note there's kind of a gap between the understanding enterprises and the crypto space right now. So you kind of have to sell them blockchain first before you can sell them a certain solution.
Yeah, so it's much easier for us to pitch Cartesi to existing Web3 developers and to those mainstream developers who are already excited about joining the blockchain movement.
Eric, just want to ask a question. How open is Cartesi to M&A, particularly traditional mainstream institutions looking to take a punt on the blockchain industry through Cartesi? For example, open to Cartesi being taken under the wing of a major institution. So hypothetically, just say Microsoft says, hey, let's take a punt on blockchain industry. we don't know anything about it, but Cartesi is extremely research-led and has a very strong technological progress. So let's take a punt on Cartesi and support them in their vision and take you guys under the wing and embrace the mass adoption narrative through blockchain industry, but using Cartesi. How open is Cartesi open to this type of strategic alignments?
Well, honestly, that's not too much our cup of tea. We are very confident in the vision and this progressive work that we're doing to position ourselves well as a strong Web3 alternative, especially in the Rollups ecosystem, and start to draw the attention of developers. And these developers, when they start to join Cartesi and they start to see what they can do and all the power that they can have, they're going to start to pitch our technology to their own companies. And so we're starting from there. We're not really looking forward to being acquired or to be sold to big companies, especially because Cartesi is essentially a decentralized project, and it's in our roadmap to become gradually more and more and more decentralized. So we are actually working this new decentralized world vision model.
We have a question here from Erick's Twitter, I believe. Maybe we can go over that.
Yeah. I think it was Matt who asked, where will you see the project in 3 to 5 years? Will Cartesi be able to experience the growth of projects like Polygon and Solana? What do you perceive to be the biggest obstacles in achieving that growth, if possible? So as we were saying before, right, we believe that what we're building at Cartesi is not something optional. We believe that it's an essential step toward the future of Web3, especially because of the issue of content scalability. And for the industry to have a massive adoption from mainstream developers and for existing Web3 developers to create their sophisticated apps, they will need something like Cartesi. So what we are focused on in the short period, first of all, of course, we are deploying the technology in the following months. We're going to be working very hard to make things as convenient as possible, as performant as possible, and working very closely with the communities of developers, listening to them, to their needs on Discord, having them participate on CIPs, on Cartesi improvement proposals. So we're going to have more and more this ear from the needs of developers out there. So there is a very strong focus at the beginning on educational content, on developer journey, on developers relation, on service design, on how can we serve developers so well that we meet their needs. We're going to be participating in conferences and hackathons and incentivizing through Cartesi Labs the adoption and the creation of interesting solutions on top of Cartesi. So all in all, we expect to achieve a very good adoption in the following years, and people realizing all the sophisticated applications they can create with Cartesi's infrastructure.
Yeah, very nice. And I mean, we see tremendous opportunities in games, creating perpetual worlds that evolve according to the community's wishes, kind of like these metaverses. Cartesi is only the beginning in that space. I mean, the things we can imagine to create with that will be amazing.
Yeah, so this is a good point, because what we see on Web3 so far, we had a very strong wave of DeFi.
Yeah.
Then we had
but I think it's important to note that in DeFi, we only see these simple lending apps
being
replicated over and over. We're not seeing anything new yet.
Yeah, even creating a decentralized order book-based exchange is very complicated.
Yeah.
And people had to Uniswap had to come up with AMM, automated market making, because doing an order book is computationally very expensive for the blockchain. So you can only do very simple stuff on the blockchain nowadays because of the scaling limits and because of the content scaling limits. So you had the first wave of DeFi with simple financial applications. You had another wave of NFTs. Mm-hmm. People are starting to wake up to the possibilities of a digital property and alternative assets and art and et cetera, et cetera. But these are really only scratching the surface. And if we want to have a future of Web3 that is significant as Web2, we're going to have to see applications that draw people there, not only because they are expecting financial gains, but because it's actually useful or because they want to have fun. People go to Web2 because they're using social media, because they are renting a car or renting a space, a villa, all these things on Web2. So Web3 also needs to have this kind of a birth. That you're gonna have to see applications that are actually useful to people, and we need an infrastructure that scales for developers to create these applications. And we see Cartesi as a necessary step for that future.
Absolutely, and we are very well positioned over the next 3 to 5 years,
and we are
in the short term.
Yeah, and I think we are well positioned because you see the trends in the Ethereum has embraced a rollup centric future, right? And rollups are gaining a lot of traction, and it's only going to increase. So we are playing that field.
Looking forward to the future.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
There is another question here about tokenomic. Will the tokenomic be improved, burn, etc.? You want to tackle this one?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so we're always looking to improve on the tokenomics of CTSI and make it a very robust token overall. I mean, the Cartesi Foundation, of course, is the entity that cares most about CTSI, and we want it to become very, very robust overall. And we've been constantly adding features. I mean, currently it powers the POS system, where stakers are earning rewards and node runners are producing blocks on the POS system, which will decentralize our rollups further down the line. And we've also been adding rollups will actually add a total new utility for CTSI itself. So validators will receive payments in CTSI. We'll add features when we have our aggregator, where CTSI will have yet another utility. And I think it's also important to note that in the longer term, everyone is familiar with how the POS system rewards node runners and stakers via the mine reserve. So we have a set amount of CTSI that was pre-mined, and this kind of bootstraps the POS system. And eventually, over the next 3 to 4 years, based on the POS emission rate, this will deplete. And after these 3 or 4 or 5 years, we'll implement what we outlined actually a couple of years ago called the macro economy. And this has a very novel staking system that runs on auction-based principles, and everyone can go and review the article for a more in-depth look. But specific to this question, it actually allows the system to either have a very controlled inflationary state or even enter into a deflationary state. So this will be interesting principles down the line when this is implemented. But again, this is a bit longer term.
So basically, it will self-regulate in terms of demands of the net, and it's kind of similar to what's happening to Ethereum. That you have Ethereum being burned after EIP 1559, and but you also have Ethereum being minted. But sometimes it can get deflationary or inflationary depending on lots of factors on the network. And some dynamics similar to that will also happen after the macro economy of Cartesi is rolled out. So the more usage you have on the network, probably we're going to lean toward a deflationary macroeconomic scenario.
Yeah, so lots of exciting stuff to come, especially when rollups are on mainnet, and looking forward to when that happens.
I wonder if there are other questions coming here.
Fafi asks, is there an approach for integrating data science to attack blockchain data needs in Cartesi, if any? Or how can a data scientist contribute to Cartesi?
I don't see how data science could attack the blockchain of Cartesi. I don't know what they mean with that exactly.
Yeah.
But well, Cartesi started, the original idea of Cartesi was to be a kind of data science project. It just evolved to be a generic layer 2 solution. But there are applications that people could develop to help data scientists, like creating a marketplace, a trustless marketplace for data science. And if someone is interested in exploring that idea, it's a very cool idea. That was the early days of Cartesi, before Cartesi was Cartesi. So you are welcome to come to Discord. We can have a chat about it.
Where you could outsource models for data science or machine learning and verify the results.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite an interesting application as well. Very scientific.
So I wonder if anyone here has another question. Please raise your hands. It's really a pleasure to engage with you guys.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Oh, sorry. One last question from me. I know the Cartesi price right now is around 16 cents, and my average entry is around 23 cents. Everyone keeps telling me, hey, Cartesi is going to hit $2, $5, $10, which doesn't seem too unrealistic and sounds very promising. What's your thoughts in terms of where you believe Cartesi's price long term would be?
So the short answer is that the Cartesi team doesn't comment on price. So we don't compare CTSI to any other token or price in general. Our commitment is to the tech and its usefulness. So we will the price will naturally, of course, follow the adoption of the ecosystem. And
hi. So I am kind of new to blockchain space. So my question might be a silly one. Still, I want to ask. So how important Ethereum is for Cartesi? I mean, is it possible for Cartesi to become like independent and handle everything by its own?
Cartesi is essentially a layer 2 protocol, technology, and infrastructure. So let's say the short answer for you would be that initially Cartesi is focused on the Ethereum ecosystem. However, from day one, we have developed the technology to be multi-chain whenever it's necessary, convenient, desirable, especially by the users of the technology. And we already engaged with other blockchains in the past, and there is interest in having Cartesi also running on other blockchains. But at this moment, our total energy and focus is on the Ethereum ecosystem.
And I think also, Luke, just to clarify, I think you're asking, as a layer 2 in itself, we actually do inherit the security guarantees of an underlying blockchain. So yes, in short, we need to be on top of another blockchain at the moment. That's a Rollups.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right. I think that was thank you for everyone for the questions. Those were fantastic. It was an absolute pleasure to be here today. I think it's about time to wrap up. We spent a lot of time and looking forward to the next coffee with Cartesi.
And come talk to us on Telegram and Discord.
Absolutely. And look forward to the next coffee with Cartesi. I think we'll be inviting other people from the tech team.
Yeah.
So it'll be another fun session.
Yeah, and bring your questions.
Absolutely.
Great to have you here, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
good
good day.
one.